I was born in Belgium, and I now live in the United States, but I was born in Belgium. And from a very young age, I was abused at a very young age, and my mother was very mentally unwell. And I believe that we were targeted, but from the age of just around my 6th birthday, I was trafficked into what I can only call a network, which at the time involved, like I didn't know who anybody was, but they turned out to be prominent politicians in Belgium, nobility, businessmen, and the elites of Belgium. It seemed that the nobility offered their castles as places where to hold the orgies. And the then Minister of National Defense was in charge for as far as I could tell. And he was mostly using me for blackmail purposes. It's a terrorist organization, really. In the first years, from 6 to 9, and we're talking, and I'm from 63, so we're talking 69 to 1972. I was mostly used for blackmail purposes. That's to say, I had to. So there would be an orgy, or it'd be a party, and often it was in a castle, and then I would be waiting in a separate room, and some handler would be there with me, waiting, or with maybe some other children as well. And then when the people had left who were not supposed to be aware of this, or who were not ready, whatever they were considered, that a certain later hour, then we were brought in. And I was often introduced to somebody who was supposedly new, and then I had to make them feel comfortable, and then take them to a room, and then they were secretly filmed, and then that was used against them. Yeah, he was a Minister of National Defense. He became Prime Minister twice afterwards. Yeah. And that's the special club. So the Minister of National Defense, first there's the corruption and the greed, and then beyond that, there's the people who didn't say no when they were confronted with a 6-year-old child. They were already triaged by the minister just to make sure that they were not going to say no, because I never had anybody saying no, and I was always stunned that they were going to not say, my goodness, this is a little girl, this is a child, I'm not doing this. So they were clearly pedophiles. And in the system, to be a pedophile, you have to be very cut off, right? You can't, nobody healthy would think that a child would be used for sex. That is completely crazy. That is really sick. So there it begins. That requires you to be completely sick. And then that sickness, those, in my experience, those who needed the power, they were pulled into this system, which then becomes completely psychopathic at the top levels. My mother actually had a contact person who didn't live so far. She was a countess. She was a part of Opus Dei in a group, a religious group. And so the certain tier of Opus Dei was then involved in this network. So was, when we're talking about the minister, he was a Freemason, and then a certain tier of the Freemasons were also involved in this network. And I think a lot of the people that were being brought in came through the Masons, or some club, some secret society that already was secret, and where there already were a lot of promises made never to speak and everything. So that by the time, they were triaged, and how much do you want it is the question, right? How much do you want the power? And whatever it is, that when you lack the self-esteem, but you want the power, it's not just ambition, because ambition is connected to the self and aligned with everything you are and what you want from life. But there it is sheer ambition because you're lacking the self-esteem because of previous trauma. So you're running away from your own trauma, from your own shadows by climbing the ladder. And this is what was offered. You know, the more you want it, that's to say, the sicker you are, the more you don't have a sense of self, the more you're not connected to yourself. You know, it begins with pedophilia, but that's already really extreme. It's extremely common. So it's also really extreme in nature, like to think that, you know, to see a child as a sex object is crazy. All these men treated me as if I was a 6-year-old prostitute. And I knew that I wasn't. She was paid. I found that out.
Oh my God.
Yes. So it wasn't, she was driving me to the places, dropping me off, picking me up at dawn, and she got paid for it, which I found out late, you know, accidentally, but I did, from within the network. At age 9, so now 1972, there was the Bilderberg meeting in Belgium, and that was great for the people in the network, or I call it a club at the time, you know, it was a club with levels. So the children were sort of the ultimate level and were mostly used for blackmail, but then there were powerful people with very sadistic desires that were then also taken care of, you know, and it linked to the royalty as well. So when I was 9, and there was a ritual that was set up to please one of the people that was coming to Belgium for the Bilderberg meeting. And so for this American billionaire, they staged a satanic ritual. And that had the elements of Satanism, with everybody wearing black robes and, you know, and hoods. And it took place in below a cathedral, in the basement of a cathedral. It seemed that was sort of the reverse of what was happening upstairs. And so there wasn't a very old altar, a black altar, and there was a pentagram, and there were all the elements were there. And 2 children were given to this billionaire, and there was a little boy with me that I was 9 and he was 7, and he was a little bit slow. He was a little bit mentally handicapped, and so I'm sorry, I felt very protective of him, and he was killed. There were 2 children. One was to be sacrificed, and the other one was to be raped by that billionaire, by the special guest. And so I was raped, but I was also forced to watch. Because he was special, that maybe it was so pitiful, because he was crying so hard. So there was nothing to dampen, you know, or to minimize what was happening in front of me. And it's just, yeah, a lot of very horrible things happened, but I just have, it's been so hard. David Rockefeller was a grandson of John Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire, or was the richest man on earth at one point, you know, from an oil magnate in the United States, and is one of the families who have really forged their way into public influence, especially in the United States, but really worldwide. This American billionaire, through extraordinary circumstances that really are beyond me, have nothing to do with me really, then took an interest in me. And that then landed me in what I call the global network, which was what the Belgians were very hard trying to get connected to these people, to do business with them and everything. And then the children, of course, the gift of these 2 children was, in that system, really the secret currency. Rockefeller was definitely a Satanist. I can't say it in any other way. That was a belief system that was adhered to by a lot of people there. I met a lot of celebrities. As I said, you know, �㝗𝗏𝗃𝗏 was there during a week that was to celebrate a satanic holiday, which was on April 30th or May 1st, I'm not sure, but it was going towards that date. There were a lot of festivities. There were horrific things that were happening. But that's the week in which I had my performance. That's the week in which, you know, things were happening there that were satanic in nature, as well as the original, you know, the original ritual that was staged by the Belgians who didn't believe this, but who wanted to do that to do business with these people. I know that it wasn't Rockefeller who was in charge, and then I know that you know, I met somebody else who clearly was had more power than him, but I don't know who ultimately was in charge. But it is a system. I don't think it really works in and of itself, because if everything is based on blackmails, then they're not real friendships, obviously, because I was supposed to ultimately be this elite sex slave to be sold amongst them and to spy amongst them. So it's not like anybody has real friendships there. Nobody's capable of having a real friendship. So the values are completely deranged and screwed up. And I feel that because of their resources and ability to control, we're getting a lot of brainwashing to try to emulate those values. I think it's old. And I think the experiments from the Nazi camps were continued. In fact, at 9 years old, I was taken to a mind control facility, actually a nice villa in Heidelberg, but the basement, mostly the basement of that villa. And so what I received there, that mind control training, was extremely precise and effective. And so there was a plan. So based on my innate ability and based on my bloodline, which I wasn't aware of myself, I was, you know, they created a persona that I was going to become for them as, you know, an elite sex slave. And to be an elite sex slave, I needed a platform myself. And so I was going to be, you know, made famous in France. And so that training was so specific and so precise, and it was done by a man who was a Nazi and who was used, I think, by this family as, you know, for their special project. I don't know exactly, but it was extremely professionally done. Like I was impressed.
Wow. To
see myself change. And what changed there that was so significant is from 6 to 9, I knew they were wrong. When I was 9 years old and I went through a year really of intense training, and meanwhile I was gone from home the whole summer of 1972. I spent the first month, July, in the United States, and the second month in that training in Germany, in that mind control training. And that whole year I was taken, and then I went back to school, but I was taken out a lot, and I was taken on weekends, I was taken either more training, or I was taken to be deployed like with a man, you know, with a politician or something. So I was used already, and I was also kept trained to become that persona, which was going to be, you know, a known actress singer in France. And then that was used, really, that platform was really only to serve to attract a certain type of men that I was then going to be, you know, involved with. And then I could just also bring in information and report back to who was then my owner. So it was a star training, yeah, to be used, so that I would be used to an entourage also, and I would be used to the comfort. And I was also promised a lot of comfort and a lot of physical rewards. My choreography for the lyrics was to sexualize every line. and to give the double sexual meaning for every line and then bring that into the performance. And so that was very well liked. What I see is the persona that I was supposed to become. I see adult celebrities that definitely seem to have been programmed